Some of my follow-up questions were how you're different than other marketing companies, but I think you already alluded to that. Not very many marketing agencies have data scientists and focus. I like the combination of the play on words, the Brandformance, because a lot of times people talk about it's either direct response or it's brand,
Yeah,
and in many instances, the direct response strategies can impact the brand and how you're perceived.
yeah,
So let's lean into the data scientist part, the attribution.
yeah.
PI firms historically have had a lot of difficulty. You'll get the last touch, a lead docket. It'll say, "Oh, it converted here," but maybe you can dive into just the attribution side and what you saw coming, from the big brand side over to the PI.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So, I mean, the big brand side, that was like 25 years ago. And obviously, they're measuring bigger KPIs like, market share and obviously overall aggregate lift. But it's really hard to kind of correlate that back to individual channels. On the PI space at scale marketing, I'd say the last 5 years, we've been able to really run some interesting tests. And I can give you various examples. I mean, one that just comes to mind right now is, TikTok in fourth quarter of last year. They opened up the space for a while. They weren't allowing personal injury advertising. Some people slipped through the cracks, but in general, it wasn't allowed. And once that was allowed, we built a strategy and we were testing it. And the whole goal was to really identify, is this generating lift? And every client's media mix is different, so it's going to have a different impact for different clients based on their other media elements. But what we really tried to do, it's called Chris. We did a geo-split test and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we basically broke up the client's market into various randomized groups of zip codes. So you have a control group that gets the baseline media, and then you have control group A that has, let's say, TikTok lead gen or TikTok reach. And then you have another control group that has both. Or you have one control group that does, reach. Yeah. And by the way, if some of your folks are not familiar with the various ways to advertise on TikTok, there's a few disciplines. You can strategize just for direct lead gen, or you can use the mechanism just to kind of pay a cheaper CPM and just have overarching brands. So I just want to make sure that's clear as well. And we just kind of separated the markets and looked at performance. Okay, this control group that has my baseline media, how's it performing? And this group that has lead gen at this spend, okay, are we seeing lift? What's the lead volume? What's the wanted leads? And ultimately downstream, what's the case volume? And then you look at all three groups, and after a 4, 6, 8 week window, there's enough statistical viability to it. And the data is mature enough to go, okay, we did this, and here's what we saw. Now, that doesn't mean that TikTok does or doesn't work. That could also be a function of creative. And so I think, Chris, a lot of this is iterative, and using data is not a one-time play. It's not a set it and forget it. It's kind of like, okay, what's the next piece of learning I need to gain to optimize my media? And once I have that learning, and by the way, some of the best learnings are no, it doesn't work. And I will say initially TikTok, for at least the client that we've been testing over the last 3 months, we haven't seen a ton of lift. We've seen like maybe 3-4% lift, but we were hoping it would be far more substantive than that.
Yeah, so let's dive in. And now you got me curious, right? Because I am definitely a novice when it comes to TikTok ads. So I didn't have this prepared at all.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you know CPMS. I think that's a metric used across a lot of industries. What's a CPM look like on TikTok for that brand lift?
Yeah. It's not a lot. It's not bad. I mean, the CPMs on TikTok are on the low side. I mean, we've seen them sub $5, depending upon seasonality.
So that's like radio range, right? Aren't they sub five?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook range is sub. You can get. Look, I don't want to share secrets. But I mean, You can get Facebook for even half of that at times, depending upon the demand in the market. So that's a pretty good CPM. But if it's not additive, if you've got Facebook in the market and it's playing its role, and you have, let's say, native tactics playing its role, you may not need TikTok. Like I was just talking about this with a client this morning, where they have such a robust mix. And I look at it as a hierarchy of media. When you understand somebody's core clientele, you understand how they consume media, and you understand the seasonality. It's like, okay, what's the next media in to test? We've really done a really good job of finding and isolating this mix as being performing really well. Where's the next channel that's going to give us incrementality, and let's test it and let's understand whether it has a role to play in the media mix.
Yeah, so I would like to, and this is self-serving right here. My question, I've got a PI firm, a pretty significant size on the West Coast, and heavy TV advertiser, a lot of billboards, has done some radio, and they're trying to get in front of the younger crowd, right? That demo,
Yeah.
and so it's really clear the younger audience uses social media, but also there's OTT out there too, and streaming, right? And taking away from the traditional TV. I think there's many of those in every market, right? You look at people that have grown, your Glenn Lerners, your Morris Bards, your Nugent Foy, Jacoby and Myers. With TV, kind of, where personally what I've seen, TV still works. With bought correctly, how do they transition and how do they start to, is it, it depends, or are you seeing a lot of success on the OTT and other areas for TikTok and paid social?
Chris, it's a great question. I mean, it's actually something that I really enjoy talking about because, it's interesting. When I came up in Young and Rubicam 30 years ago, it was a traditional media landscape. It was television, it was radio, it was boards, it was direct mail. And we all grew up learning that space, like reading Nielsen books, estimating ratings on programs, like, oh, what's ER going to do? Like, let's look at what it's done the last 4 quarters. So it was a really robust way of looking at traditional. And then you've got 10, 20 years later, a younger crop of marketers coming in that really don't have that background on traditional media. They don't understand, kind of how the programming works, how to buy it, how to negotiate it. But they know digital really well because they grew up with it. They grew up on Snapchat. They're growing up on TikTok, and Facebook's no longer even cool for that younger demographic. It was like 5, 10 years ago, but it's not. And I think, what we try to do and what I try to do is meld the two together. There's not a lot of folks that have that legacy traditional media understanding that knows the efficiencies there, know how to get that $2 to $5 CPM, maybe up to 10, depending upon the market if you really had to. But like really know how to leverage that low CPM for top of funnel awareness, but then really can look at the emerging social and digital space to understand the roles that these channels play. And I hate to use the word buyer journey because everybody throws it out, but like people are researching, they're reading articles, they're in the middle of their funnel. And TV does, if you have a top line brand message, it doesn't help push somebody that's already considering. And so it's really understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each channel and engineering a mix that really reaches folks at all phases of that process. Where in the past, it's just blast TV, they'll come to you. That still works. But when you support it with mid-funnel tactics and lower funnel tactics, obviously paid search, local service, there's some others, like that cohesive mix of leveraging legacy media, I guess. I mean, I hate to call anything I learned legacy media, kind of dating to me, but legacy media with those emerging data technologies that, by the way, Chris, are changing like daily and weekly. And if you don't stay on top of it, you're already falling behind. So to us, we try to meld both. Those folks that are just using traditional media, I think, are missing the boat. And candidly, I think folks that are just exclusively using social and digital channels, connected television, without traditional media are also missing out on both. And so to us, we've seen, our firm's managing partner who started up believes in a symphony of media. Social media is an oboe. You've got traditional media is the violin, whatever the case, and you need all of these kind of working together seamlessly and efficiently in one holistic cost per case. If everybody's not familiar with the cost per case, like we can get into that. Cost per lead, cost per wanted lead, so on and so forth. So it's piecing all of those together, starting out with a plan, and then looking at the digital has so much data, the KPI data, the soft KPI data, soft KPI being like click-through rates, engagement rates, time on site, with hardcore KPIs like conversion rates on a website and so on and so forth. And you piece all that together, and then really marketing and traditionally you used to place a buy, you couldn't move it very much. It was kind of, 2 weeks out, you were kind of stuck for a while. Digital, you can lever on and off on a daily basis. And so it's marrying those two disciplines together that is what scale does and our philosophy and where we've had success with the law firms we're fortunate to represent.